Let's start with the prompt. Which quotation from a translation most effectively illustrates the claim? So what is the claim? The Poet Walt Whitman is an essay by Marti, an author and activist, originally written in Spanish. In the essay, Marti explores the value of literature, arguing that a society's spiritual well-being depends on the character of its literary culture. So that there's a connection between spiritual well-being and literary culture. So let's start reading the answer choices. We need to illustrate that claim. A, poetry, which brings together or separates, fortifies or brings anguish, shores up or demolishes souls, which gives or robs men of faith and vigor, is more necessary to a people than industry, for industry provides them with a means of subsistence, while literature gives them the desire and strength for life. So that definitely is in line with the idea that the literary culture matches the spiritual well-being, because it says if you have the literature, you have a desire and strength for life. So you have spiritual well-being. So that one's pretty good. Let's look at B. Every society brings to literature its own form of expression, and the history of the nations can be told with greater truth by the stages of literature than by chronicles and decades. I probably would get rid of this one because it's telling us that history is better told by literature than by straight up history books, which is probably a true point. Who knows? But it's not what's being said. It's saying that literature is sort of a litmus test for the spiritual well-being of a society. So it's a slightly different point than saying poetry or literature gives a more accurate snapshot than history books do. So looking at C. Where will a race of men go when they have lost the habit of thinking with faith about the scope and meaning of their actions? The best among them, those who consecrate nature with their sacred desire for the future, will lose in a sordid and painful annihilation all stimulus to alleviate the ugliness of humanity. So this is saying that when we have lost literature, then we will have lost our stimulus to make the world a better place. Because where will a race of men go when they've lost the habit of thinking with faith about scope and meaning of their actions? So that this part right here, I would call that literature, thinking with faith about the scope and meaning of our actions. And the best people, maybe this is saying the writers themselves, will lose all stimulus to alleviate the ugliness of humanity. So it's saying we'd be nothing without literature. So this is definitely at least really close, just like A is. So now let's go to D. Listen to the song of the hardworking and satisfied nation. Listen to Walt Whitman. The exercise of himself exalts him to majesty. Tolerance exalts him to justice, and order to joy. So this is basically an expression that Walt Whitman is a great author, and it's kind of giving us these majestic metaphors to describe how great he is. But it really doesn't relate to what we're looking for, which is the idea that a society's spiritual well-being depends on the character of its literary culture. So now we have it down to A and C, but I might get rid of C next, because C says, where will a race of men go when they have lost the habit of thinking with faith about the scope and meaning of their actions? So there might be a little bit of assumption there. This is not necessarily saying that it's literature we're talking about here. There might be a lot of ways to think with faith about the scope and meaning of the actions. So because we're not necessarily certain that that even is literature that's being discussed there, we can maybe get rid of that one. And the answer is A, which once again says that poetry, literature, has all these great characteristics, and it's more necessary than industry because it gives them the desire and strength for life. So if you don't have poetry or literature, you don't have desire or strength for life. And so that can be synonymous with the idea that our spiritual well-being depends on the literary culture. So the answer here is A.